if you're like us, you're fed up. South Park sucks now.
They did it! They said the thing! Everybody look, South Park said the thing! Yeah, we got a lot to talk about this week. Now, when I saw the description for this new episode, I immediately got excited, because it said, and I quote, "Stan thinks South Park has gotten too political," which is something I've talked about on this channel. I think the show is much stronger when we're getting one-off adventures with the boys. You know, episodes like Casa Bonita, Night of the Living Homeless, or more recently, the Dick and Bob's episode. And I feel like the non-stop political commentary is starting to get tired and overdone, especially since it's been leaning on the same jokes repeated over and over again. So when I found out that South Park would be addressing this concern directly, I was overcome with excitement. Like, hell yeah, what a classic move from Trey and Matt to show that they still have that big dick energy. They're not afraid to shy away from criticism, they're gonna tackle it head on. But at the same time, I felt concerned, because it dawned on me, what if they just make this episode to dismiss the criticism as invalid? What if this is gonna cater to the overly political people who have latched onto this new season because of the Trump stuff and just ignore the longtime fans of the show? Well, after watching the episode, I'm happy to say that they gave the OG fans some much needed validation, but they did it in a very bittersweet way.
I know it's hard to see right now, but things will go back to normal. And in the meantime, we just have to make the most of where we are.
Now, before we get into this episode analysis, I have some concerning news to share with you guys. If you're not interested in this, I'm gonna provide some chapters in the description so that you can just skip directly to the episode commentary. But to keep this brief, you might recall that I recently made a community post about how Paramount blocked my video on the Israel episode. Well, that has since escalated to a full-on DMCA takedown of the video and a strike on my channel, which is really crazy because after 3 strikes, YouTube deletes your channel. And this didn't just happen to me, it also happened to Blooms. Yeah, Blooms has also received a DMCA takedown and strike on his channel for his video on the Israel episode. Now, I don't want you guys to get too worried because thankfully, YouTube has a built-in system that lets you counter false copyright claims. And these are false copyright claims because both of our videos are transformative and fall under fair use. So the videos will most likely go back up and the strikes will be removed from our channels. Unless, of course, Paramount decides to sue both of us, which is a real possibility, by the way, because to counter a DMCA takedown, you're essentially making a legal request to reinstate the video, which means that Paramount has 10 business days to file a lawsuit against us, or they have to release the claim. But the crazy part is that Blooms did some digging, and it turns out that these copyright claims were made by a company called Video Sites, which is an AI copyright detection service that is used by companies like Paramount, the NBA, and more. And that Video Sites company just so happens to be located in Netanya, Israel. Yeah, I know. What are the odds? Now, I'm not a conspiracy guy. I'm sure that this is more likely related to some specific clip that we both used in our videos. I mean, Johnny Two Cellos did a video on the same episode and he had no issues, so there's gotta be a reason for that. But I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty weird that we only got targeted for this episode and not any of our other videos. So I'm just gonna say right now, if anyone is blaming this on a certain race or group of people, I think you're an idiot and I don't wanna see you in my comment section. But anyways, I'm honestly not really concerned with that stuff so much as I am the AI service itself. I might make a video going into more detail on this soon, but it's very concerning to me that Blooms and I both got strikes on our channels because of some crappy AI service that failed to evaluate fair use properly. Because the idea of more companies deferring to AI services like this is very worrying. I can imagine a bleak future where channels are getting taken down over false copyright claims en masse, which sounds absolutely terrifying to me. But yeah, I basically just wanted to let you guys know what was going on behind the scenes because getting a channel strike over this is extremely f***ed in my opinion, and it just felt like I should say something. Anyways, to avoid further copyright claims, all future South Park clips will now be replaced by MS Paint drawings.
There has to be somewhere else we can live.
Come on, Stan. You have that space over there by Grandpa's pan.
Wow, that took like half an hour to make. Never mind, I changed my mind. Anyways, much like with the previous episode, I think it makes more sense to cover this thing one story at a time instead of chronological order, especially since the 2 stories here are almost completely separate and only barely connect at the end. So that's gonna be the approach to this video. But yeah, this whole thing kicks off with the Marsh family moving into the old folks' home with Grandpa, because they've apparently been living in a motel ever since the end of Tegrity Farms. And I gotta say, I was not expecting that. For some reason, I just assumed that they were gonna be back in Stan's old house, even though the move was never shown in an episode. But in retrospect, it definitely makes sense that they would be in some kind of transitionary situation, because that's usually how the show has handled big changes like that in the past. Whether it's Cartman's hot dog house, Garrison leaving his job to come out of the closet, Kenny dying and coming back, sort of. They tend to like doing things in steps when it comes to returning to the status quo. And on top of that, this season has been all about shaking things up. You know, PC Principal is conservative, Mr. Mackey has gone from the school, Jesus is everywhere. So sticking the Marsh family in Grandpa's retirement home actually fits pretty well with all of that. Plus, I think it's just a clever comedy situation to put them in. They're in an old folks home, they don't belong there. It's ripe with comedic opportunities, especially with how excited Randy is trying to be about living there, you know? Do I smell a potential Randy versus retired people storyline? Huh? No, wait, no, never mind. That's just the smell of old people in adult diapers.
Poop pants.
What?
Poop pants.
Poo pants?
Poop pants.
You pooped your pants?
Poop my pants.
Oh.
But seriously, I love that we're getting more Grandpa Marsh stuff because I think he's a highly underrated character. Anyway, Stan is obviously very bummed about his new living situation, and I feel for him. Bro has literally not caught a break since moving to the farm, which leads to him, Kyle, and Kenny starting a movement over how South Park sucks now, because they believe that what's happening to Stan is just an extension of what's been happening to the town, which is that all this political stuff is getting in the way of everything that once made South Park great. The boys don't go on adventures anymore, Kenny hasn't said anything in like 4 months, when was the last time Butters was grounded? It's pandemonium out there. And yeah, you know, it feels pretty damn cathartic to hear Stan say things like that when it directly reflects how I felt about this latest run of episodes. Like, I've been echoing these sentiments for weeks now, and at the very least, I feel heard by Trey and Matt. I mean, the dudes literally said like and subscribe during their South Park Sucks Now speech, so I feel like they actually do check in on the South Park YouTubers here and there. So, if anyone is listening right now, you don't need to comment. Just put dog poo in your next episode and I'll know what it means. Now, if this storyline was entirely focused on the concept of South Park losing its way and the boys leading a movement to undo those changes, I think it would have been awesome. Because there's a lot of funny ways they can approach a topic like that with different people in town joining them or opposing them. Like, I can imagine Mackie joining forces with them, wanting his life to return to normal. It would also be pretty cool if somebody like Officer Barbrady came back into the picture too, fighting for his place back in the show. But none of that really matters because they end up going with a completely different direction for this storyline. Because as soon as the movement starts getting traction, Stan turns it into a meme coin.
This used to be a great town before all the politics came and ruined it all. Get in on our crypto meme coin with this incredible pre-sale offer.
I love how Kyle and Kenny look super unprepared for Stan to start rambling about crypto like that. It's a good bit. Now, I have mixed feelings about this crypto direction for the story, because on one hand, I'm definitely down with them doing a crypto rug pull thing. They haven't really done that yet, and I love that they're extremely upfront about how this is just a scheme to steal people's money. Though I gotta say, it is a little immoral for Stan. Feels more like a Cartman scheme, if you ask me. And I also like that it brought back Kyle's cousin Kyle, who is one of the funniest side characters in this entire show. So there was definitely a lot to enjoy about the storyline here, but as somebody that genuinely agrees with the sentiment behind the movement that the boys start, I don't exactly love how it effectively cheapens what I see as legitimate criticisms against what South Park has been doing, because it doesn't really provide much of an argument for why South Park can't change back. There's no clever counter argument that addresses the criticism. It's just using the flaws of a character to undermine the message, which feels kind of underwhelming for such a direct and meta call out from the show. Now, I will say that I enjoy the continuity here. Stan has been shown to act selfishly in the past with episodes like A Scause for Applause or Butterballs. We know that he likes to hijack movements, so this does fit well with his general characterization, plus his motivation makes perfect sense. He doesn't want to live in this crappy retirement home anymore and thinks getting rich will be a quick fix solution for all of his problems. But I think the whole South Park sucks now thing would have been more effective if they'd provided a direct counter to it instead. I mean, Kyle says his little speech at the end, which we'll discuss in a minute, but it really feels like a missed opportunity to not go deeper with the meta commentary here. And while it's true that America is in a position that has no quick fix solution, which is obviously the double meaning of this whole joke, South Park is not America. They don't have to keep making hyper-political episodes if they don't want to. They literally do have a quick fix solution in their hands. They can write themselves out of this situation whenever they want. So I have my qualms about their approach here, even though I get that this is doubling as commentary on the idea that nobody is really standing up to Trump. Like when Stan says that nobody is doing anything about the fact that South Park sucks now, it's probably meant to also mean that nobody is doing anything about the fact that America sucks now. But even with that in mind, I still feel like Stan turning it into a crypto scheme kind of sidesteps the whole conversation altogether, even if that is in line with him co-opting movements for his own benefits in general. Also, while we're on the subject of consistent characterization, I was really happy to see that Kyle refused to take part in the rug pull even though they were positioned to make ass loads of money.
I thought you were sick of the way South Park was going, Stan.
I am.
So then why are you trying to engineer a rug pull in conjunction with the federal government?
Now to me this sounds like Trey and Matt saying that if you want South Park to go back to normal, then you should want America to go back to normal, because then they wouldn't have to focus on their many issues with Trump. But the way they frame this is weird, because if Stan is supposed to represent us as the audience, then it makes it feel like Kyle is saying this to us. But the audience isn't complicit in any of this, they're just tuning into a show that's been around for decades. So I can't help but feel like their aim here is a bit off. Now, as I'm sure you could have guessed, the rug pull doesn't actually work out. Kyle's cousin Kyle goes to the White House to get their coin approved, but due to the shenanigans going on there, which we'll discuss shortly, it never goes through. And so instead, the coin dies and cousin Kyle goes to prison for 10 years, which is crazy, but I mean, between him, Mackie, and Dowley, this season isn't exactly kind to its secondary characters, you know? And that's what brings us to the end of this storyline. Stan gives up trying to change the situation, and Kyle shares his thoughts on the state of South Park, saying that even though it's hard to see, things will go back to normal. Which again, is obviously a double meaning. Kyle is saying that South Park will go back to normal, but he's also implying that America will go back to normal. And that's probably the most optimistic thing we've heard in this entire season, given that so many of its episodes have ended in a very bleak and dark sort of way. Now, personally, I'm not so optimistic about the state of our world right now. It seems like authoritarianism is creeping in from every possible angle. Everyone is so tribal and divided, living in separate realities from each other, accusing their opposers of being bots like they're Sneeko or something. So it's a very black-pilling time, no doubt, but I appreciate the sense of optimism from Kyle nonetheless. After all, Trey and Matt are much older than I am, so maybe they have a deep wisdom about this that is less obvious to someone like me. Plus, if nothing else, this is basically their way of saying, we will go back to the classic South Park formula after this, which makes me happy. I also just really enjoyed that Kenny and Kyle are there to support Stan in his time of need, because it shows that their broship is still going strong. They've got each other's backs, as long as it doesn't involve stealing money from people. And that's pretty much the end of their story for this episode. Stan takes Kyle's words to heart and chooses to make the best of a situation, which closes out on a shot of him taking part in a senior dance class exercise.
If I didn't care.
Good seniors, nice.
But yeah, that marks the end of the storyline with the boys in this episode, leaving us with the other half of this episode, which is about Trump and a spooky encounter that he keeps having at the White House. But you know what? I'm getting sick and tired of this repetitive Trump stuff, so I'm just not going to talk about it. Okay, fine, I'll talk about it. So as I'm sure you guys have noticed, every episode in this run has had a different critique of Trump and his associates. Whether it's about sycophants, suing everybody, Kristi Noem, Brendan Carr, conflicts of interest, they always have a different angle to go at him with, even if the jokes end up feeling largely the same. And in this week's episode, that main target seems to be Pam Bondi. Now, if you don't know who she is, Pam Bondi was a defense lawyer for Trump during his impeachment trial and is now the Attorney General. So she's basically the main legal advisor for Trump on like all legal matters. Or at least that's what Wikipedia says, because I had no clue who she was before watching this episode. Anyways, the main joke here is that she's a brown-noser. She compliments Trump constantly, licking his ass clean with her flattery, and this manifests itself as some kind of spirit poo that keeps appearing on her face. Yeah, it's another visual metaphor type joke that's taken literally, kind of like the Trump being in bed with Satan joke. And I gotta say, it's a pretty decent gag, because even though it's only mildly funny the first time you see it, they keep building on the joke, so it gets funnier each time. Like at first it shows up as a little chunk of crap on her face, but then later in the episode, we get these hilarious Fox News bulletins where they show pictures of her with crap just absolutely smeared across her face. Those were pretty good. They got a good laugh out of my juvenile ass. But the creme de la creme joke with Pam Bondi was definitely the part where the paranormal investigators got involved.
A bridge between the spiritual world and ours. In this case, it appears to be some kind of rectoplasm.
The word rectoplasm is just too funny not to laugh at. But anyways, the main story at the White House is that ever since tearing down the East Wing, Trump starts seeing a spooky entity everywhere he goes. The woman in the hat. And they treated her like a ghost spirit thing, despite the fact that it's actually just his wife, Melania, which just makes the whole thing extra funny, because like, what is this, Kafka on the shore? But yeah, basically the story here is that Trump and his associates are freaked out by the spooky stuff happening to them, so they spend the whole episode trying to get rid of her, which ultimately ends with them trying to do a seance. Now, as this is all going down, JD Vance is on red alert, because he's convinced that this is all a ploy to expose his plans and stop him from eventually becoming president, which is also why this episode doesn't really follow up on the Peter, Thiel, and Cartman storyline that we left on in the previous episode, because Vance doesn't want others to see Thiel with Cartman. But despite his protests, they go through with it anyways. They bring together this weird and creepy cast of characters that have surrounded Trump throughout the season and do a seance, which ultimately leads to absolutely nothing. Yeah, in terms of actual storyline, that's pretty much the whole thing. There's no real conclusion to the spooky side plot. It kind of just ends. But that shouldn't really be too surprising because, like with many of the Trump segments in this season, it's less about the story and more about the gags and critique. Like, we get a lot of funny examples of Trump sicking Pam Bondi on people who challenge him. A mention of the Epstein files, which is always a great thing, never stop mentioning the Epstein files. And we get a lot of random out-of-pocket moments, like Trump using Towley to clean his genitals, which is not only awful for Towley, but weird in general since Towley is supposed to be his cum rag, so that's pretty gross. And also, speaking of Trump's splooge, apparently he eats it.
And it's 14% its own cum.
Oh my god! I ate!
Yeah, that's important episode analysis right there. Anyways, while Pam Bondi being Trump's attack dog is the main commentary in this part of the episode, I did enjoy the new additions to the crew and the way they brought everyone else back. Like, they turned Stephen Miller into this Igor from Frankenstein type person. They made Brendan Carr look and act like a mummy because he lost his freedom of speech. It definitely felt creepy, and it reminded me of the episode Butt Out, where all the anti-cigarette people looked and sounded like ghouls. So, in a nutshell, that's basically what made this a Halloween episode. Because not only is there a spooky Melania Trump appearing everywhere, but these White House people are all walking around the place like a bunch of freaky deaky monsters or something. And that's why they released this episode on Halloween instead of their usual Wednesday scheduled time. Now, does that justify f***ing up my weekend with my girlfriend by forcing me to work on this video when we should be smoking weed and playing Resident Evil 5 co-op mode? Not at all, but what can you do? Anyways, my absolute favorite part of this storyline was when Cousin Kyle arrived at the White House, because it just so happened to coincide with the seance they were all about to perform, leaving him to be completely freaked out by Trump's associates. And I just thought that the way they brought the Kristi Noem gag from episode 2 here was brilliant.
I gotta get out of here! Oh, God! Oh!
Now, I'd feel bad for Cousin Kyle because he got scared into a confession that lands him in 10 years of prison, but he was also willingly scamming people with the rug pull, so I don't know, he kind of deserves it. But yeah, like I mentioned before, there isn't really a pronounced end to this story. It's mostly just a vehicle for jokes and critiques that we pop in and out of, and that all kind of just ends with Cousin Kyle going to jail. So I don't really have much more to say in terms of recap and analysis for this side of the story, which is why I think it's time for us to move on to the review portion of the video where I can properly get into my thoughts on this. Now overall, I thought this was a decent episode. It was obviously pretty sweet to get more of an old school South Park storyline with the boys, and I think it had some really solid ideas and jokes throughout. Like I said, I'm eager to see more of the Marsh family living at the old folks home. That has a lot of potential in my opinion. But I can't lie, it felt weird not getting a continuation of what we started in the previous episode. We only got one scene with Cartman in it, and I was definitely hoping to see more of him, though I do like that he was still laughing at the 6'7" meme in his sleep, which is a nice little touch. And as for Jesus, we didn't get to see him at all, which again, I really wanted to see more of. So I think it was a bit of an odd choice to tell a completely different story here, especially when they could have done the stuff about South Park sucking in the next episode anyways, which honestly could have been even better if Cartman was involved with it. But my guess here is that they felt very strongly about the criticism they've been getting online and were compelled to talk about it instead of waiting. I mean, Trey has historically been a very self-critical person when it comes to his own work, so I wouldn't be surprised if he was taking that criticism to heart and that's why we got this episode. But either way, it was easily the best part of the episode, and I really enjoyed the fact that they addressed things that obviously came directly from fans of the show, like how Kenny hasn't really been involved that much.
Like, Kenny, I haven't even heard you say anything in like 4 months.
What the heck you want to say, dude?
But as enjoyable as that half of the episode was, I also think that this is one of the episodes where the Trump stuff took up way too much time. And look, you know me, I'm pretty fatigued on the Trump stuff in general, but I've also been happy to admit when they pull it off. I even praised the Trump storylines in the last 2 episodes. But his entire thing in this episode just felt so out of place to me. I mean, it was almost completely disconnected from the rest of the story as far as I can tell. Like, there wasn't even a thematic crossover this time. And I think it's almost comical that they would spend so much time on the Trump stuff in an episode that is directly calling out the overly political state of South Park right now. Cause like, I swear the White House stuff almost doesn't even feel like South Park to me at times. It feels more like a spiritual successor to Trey and Matt's old sitcom, That's My Bush. Except now it's Hey Satan. And you know what made That's My Bush so great? That it wasn't South Park. It was its own thing that I could choose to watch separately from one of my favorite shows. So even though this one had some funny jokes in it, and the characters of everyone were decently amusing, I couldn't help but feel like I was impatiently waiting for the storyline to flip back to South Park. I felt like Milhouse watching Itchy and Scratchy, wondering when they were gonna get to the fireworks factory. Though I won't lie, that Fox News Alert joke had some sweet delivery. But yeah, at this point, I don't think I can deny it anymore. I'm just so tired of being force-fed this Trump stuff. I'm tired of the over-reliance on the same jokes. I'm tired of the Satan butt baby storyline. After 7 episodes of this, I'm just running out of patience. Like, the commentary and criticisms might be varied, but the repetitive humor totally overshadows it, and I'm just fully over it. Especially since it's always taking time away from these superior storylines in every single episode. And I don't want to hear about how it's important, okay? Like, I get where people are coming from with that, I do. South Park is a good platform to reach people who might not otherwise know about these political issues, but I don't think it needs to span an entire double season thing. And I swear to God, if you're one of those people that thinks expressing this sentiment makes me a Trump supporter, then you are just dumb as f. Because I don't like Trump, but I can dislike Trump and dislike the state of South Park right now at the same time. It's not mutually exclusive. The world isn't so black and white. There's more nuance to life than a simple left versus right dichotomy, so give me some goddamn old school South Park. Anyways, I guess it doesn't matter how annoyed I am, because this episode was their way of telling us that we're not gonna get an end to this anytime soon, at least not until the end of this season. So for that reason, I'm just gonna shut up about it now. When the next episode comes out, I'll critique the Trump storylines for the humor and pacing, and that's it. But I also think it's worth saying that even though I don't like this Trump stuff right now, I don't think South Park sucks, because it's clear as ever that their sense of humor is still intact. And in my opinion, the humor was always the superpower of the show, not the commentary. The commentary can be good, but it's the jokes that keep me coming back. And in my opinion, those jokes have always been strongest when it's between the 4 boys. But anyways, those are my thoughts. Decent episode overall, but not quite as good as Conflict of Interest or last week's episode. But you know, that's just me. What did you guys think? Did you guys like the episode a lot? Is there a better co-op game that my girlfriend and I should be playing? Let me know in the comments below. Bye.